Now, one of the items that were quite important to humanistic psychologists and theorists was looking at and understanding the concept of self. And like I said, Rogers was probably one of the main characters in looking at specifically how do we define who we are in terms of when I say myself, what exactly does that mean? And so he looked at actual or real self, if you will, the things that are actually seen in the world around me. And then we also have the ideal self. In other words, what is it about me that I want to be or should be? And that's the backdrop to looking at and exploring the self. Rogers used a questionnaire that was geared toward prompting people to look at their self-concept itself, the self-concept, and ultimately, this questionnaire, we even had it for kids, is childhood self-concept. That's how we determine really what the self-concept is. And from Rogers' perspective, in order to have a fully developed self-concept, then I need to identify the obstacles that exist within me, and I need to push through those, which means essentially negating them, not negating them, but neutralizing them, and pursuing growth rather than avoiding difficulty or negative. So questionnaire, self-concept, the fully developed self really is by pushing through obstacles. And humanist psychologists maintain that we can really only understand each other, each person's unique experience through interviews and intimate conversations. One of the things that humanist psychologists and theorists introduced, which I fully agree with, is that quantifying the human personality is is by its nature dehumanizing, and that's what a lot of these personality inventories and things of that sort are doing, is that they essentially, by quantifying, in other words, true or false, and then having multiple items that go with that, by doing that, we're actually quantifying. How do we create a scale, which we'll look at in the next module? How do we create a scale that will show the person's personality characteristics relative to other people? And the humanist theorists basically said when you reduce human personality down to that, you are dehumanizing them. Really, the best way to understand people is interpersonal interviews or conversations. By the very nature of what we do with testing, we have to reduce it to numbers. And by doing something like that, we lose the richness and the depth of the human personality by doing testing like that. And that, for me at least, that has been the major pushback for me about regarding testing, is that instead I don't want to reduce the human personality to a number on a page. I'd rather look at it in terms of data points based on my interactions with other people. Now, the last thing I want to mention to you is just the evaluation component, and we do this with each one. And when we talk about evaluating the humanist theories, most people would suggest that it is not only vague, but this theory is also very subjective, and that's, in a lot of ways, I think many humanist theorists would say, well, yeah, so I mean that really actually captures humanity, is that there's a lot about it that's vague, that's indescribable, that's subjective, etc. So the other one that actually is leveled against it is that it's quite naive. In looking at the human condition and man's inhumanity to man, it's really quite naive to suggest the biblical concept, and that is that man is born evil. Man is not born good. He is born in sin, as David talks about in Psalm. And so the element of that seems to sidestep that issue because of how they look at, the humanists look at humanity in general. Another one is the increase or the glorification of individualism. And that's another criticism that's leveled at humanism, because there's a tendency to promote self-indulgence, self-centeredness, selfishness, moral conviction really is only built on oneself rather than built on some external standard. And so the optimism that is portrayed in humanism doesn't seem to match our world. It doesn't seem to match the world that we actually live in itself. So the moral conviction is basically based on me, not on some external standard. And by doing it that way, then it ends up being quite circular. This is a good thing. How do you determine this is good? Because I say it's good. Well, then how if you say it's good and I say it's good, how can both be good? You see the reasoning that comes out of this. And this has been a major criticism in certainly Christian circles at the humanistic perspective, because of the very nature of the word humanism is that man is at the center of the universe. And with that view in mind, man is also the ground of truth. And for many of us that come from a Christian or Christocentric worldview, it doesn't make sense. It seems to us, at least, to be quite circular to say, I say it's true and you say it's true, then both can be true because we each have our own version of truth. But then truth, actually, by its very nature, loses its power if both of us can be true in something. Now, one way to consider it is something that I may have mentioned to you before, and that's the idea of big T truth versus small t truth. The reality in which I live is the small t truth. There are things that are true about me that are only true about me, not anyone else. And that's small t, that's not big T. But on the other hand, big T truth, which is rejected by humanistic theories, big T truth is built on the truth that's given us by God, that there is such a thing as an absolute truth. There is such a thing as an absolute reality, which is ultimately grounded in God's existence, if you will, and what He helps us to understand about living life and seeing people and our need for Him. So a few extraneous comments in terms of evaluation to the humanism perspective, just so we understand it in context.